Jenny Milligan.
Yes, it's.
Out there from 80 to 80. No, I'm not, no, but I lost my mother a year ago and just was interested in seminars.
Okay, that's where I.
I love these microphones.
They are very nice.
I just wish they had the right words in them. That they don't always produce the right words.
Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. Grateful to have all of you who come this afternoon. My name is Derek Williams. I'm the Associate Minister here at Great Oaks, and we're glad to have Dean Miller and Cheryl Lawhorn with us today from the Widowhood Workshop Ministry. And I'm just going to turn it over to Dean and let him do his thing.
Boy, that was quick.
I don't get paid by the word.
You knew how much time you needed.
Hey, thank you very much for being here. I know that there are other places you could have been this afternoon, but you chose to be here, and I really appreciate that for two reasons. Number one, your time's really important. At the end of our life, there's going to be a quantity of time that we've been blessed with, and we don't get it anymore. And so it's really valuable. So using your time wisely is a very, very important part of a wise kind of life. So we are going to treasure your time. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that when you leave here with the feeling that this has been worth the investment of this time that I'll never get back. And that's what we really want to make sure that we do. We want to respect your time. And we want you to feel good about the time you invested here. Now, another reason why I appreciate you being here is, let's be really honest about this, and this is a very honest kind of a workshop. This is not a positive topic as people typically view it. As a matter of fact, some people are scared to death to even expose themselves to this kind of subject. When you talk about things like loss, grief, pain, struggle, those are unattractive topics to be talking about. But despite the fact that you could have viewed it that way, you still came. And so I want to commend you for your investment of your time, and we'll try to treat you right in that regard. And I appreciate the choice that you made to be here. And what's really funny is at the end of workshops, this is very typical. Cheryl Wayne and I both have this common experience. We'll have people come to us, and they'll want to express themselves in a positive way about the experience of being at the workshop. And they'll hesitate when they use the word enjoy. Because see, this is a living with loss workshop. Living with loss workshop. And people are very hesitant to say, man, I really enjoyed that. Because they feel uncomfortable about using the word enjoy. But really, you will enjoy this. This is not a doom and gloom atmosphere. There are going to be times that, on occasion, we are going to get personal, and there are going to be some personally touching kinds of things that we'll note. But we try to do this in a way that is a healthy atmosphere. And one thing that can lighten burdens is a little bit of levity. There's a lot of wisdom in the Proverbs. Proverbs 17, in that chapter, it says that a merry heart does good like medicine. Now, not only does it do good, but it's also cheaper than what you buy at CVS. So this lightheartedness is a very valuable thing. And so periodically, we're going to make it a point to create some levity, because we are dealing with what can be a very heavy kind of a burden. So I like to collect stories, unique, cute stories or observations, and periodically I will share some of those with you. So let me share a couple things here with you. Somebody said, I don't like to think before I speak. I like to be just as surprised as everybody else about what comes out of my mouth. That must have been written by a man. Here is, this is like Cheryl Wayne coming from Carthage, Missouri, driving down to Memphis, Tennessee. If he got pulled over, the cop says to Cheryl Wayne, hey, dude, you were going too fast. Cheryl Wayne says, hey, I'm just trying to keep up with the traffic. The cop said, there isn't any traffic. And so Cheryl Wayne said, I know, that's how far behind I am, and I'm trying to catch up. But he still got a ticket. Lord, grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and friends to post bail for me when I finally snap. Now, this is a cute story about a widow lady. Her husband passed away, and in his will, he provided for a $30,000 memorial service. $30,000 memorial service. After the last guest left the memorial service, his wife, Helen, turned to her best friend and said, well, best friend, you think Joe would be pleased? And the friend said, I'm sure he'd be pleased. But the friend lowered her voice and kind of leaned into her friend, the widow lady, and said, how much did this really cost? And the widow lady said, all of it, $30,000. Jody said, no way, are you kidding me? I mean, this was nice, but $30,000 for this memorial service I just attended? And the widow lady said, yeah, the funeral was $6,500. I donated $500 to the church. The wake, the food, and the drinks were another $500, and the rest went for a memorial stone. Well, the friend started doing the math. Girl math is what my granddaughter calls it. The friend was doing girl math and said, $22,500 for a memorial stone. Now, memorial stones do cost a lot, at the cemetery. So she was asked, how big was the memorial stone? And the widow lady said 2.5 carats. Now, don't you think that's a smart widow lady? 2.5 carats. That's what I call a smart widow lady. Oh, please, one thing that's great about having kids around, I love having kids at hospitals. I love having kids at funeral homes because they have no filter between their brain and lips. They just say stuff. And sometimes what they do and what they say really does break the tension involved in serious situations. And that's why we like to enjoy a little bit of levity in the course of what we're doing here. Now, Cheryl Wayne's going to be distributing some gifts from the Widowhood Workshop Ministry. One is a notepad and the other is a pen. And we want every family represented here to have a notepad and a pen. Feel free to take some notes if you would like, or just take it home. And we want to thank you for coming to the workshop. The Widowhood Workshop Ministry does not just deal with widowed folks. The reason why it's called Widowhood Workshop Ministry is because the loss of a spouse is typically, for most people, the greatest loss they will experience in their life. The studies that have been done of life stressors, usually when they do these evaluations and these surveys, they will come up with 100 life stressors and they will rank them in the order of the impact and the level of stress that they cause. In any one of those studies, the number one and number two thing on that list is always the same. The number two thing on that list is divorce. And the number one most difficult life stressor is the loss of a spouse by death. That's why the ministry is called Widowhood Workshop. What we deal with is what we want to do is we want to glorify God by educating people about the powerful impact of loss. That's what we're going to start talking about today, the powerful impact of loss. And we want to encourage people who are dealing with that powerful impact. So these workshops are all about education and encouragement relative to loss and the impact of loss. Now, occasionally, we're going to make reference to the loss of a spouse. We are going to have one session tomorrow that deals exclusively with that personal experience of the loss of a spouse. And the reason why we have that one session is because the only way a good marriage ends, there's only one. Now, there are many ways bad marriages end. Many ugly ways bad marriages end. There's only one way a good marriage ends, and that's death. And that leaves somebody behind. And so one of the things we want to do is we want to educate married people about the challenge of the transition from being married to being widowed. When I was a local preacher for many years, I would not officiate at a wedding ceremony without doing premarital counseling because I felt like the couple needed some help going from single to married. Now, if you buy that idea, then don't we need to prepare married people in the transition from being married to being widowed? And so that is a value to this Living with Loss workshop, especially in light of the fact that the loss of a spouse by death is typically the most cruel and most difficult of all the losses we have to experience. But we're going to be talking about all kinds of losses, and you'll see the value of this as we move along. This is a relaxed atmosphere. I didn't come here to talk to you. I came here to talk with you, and I want you to feel free to participate. You know some things that I don't know. You've had some experiences that I have not had. I can learn from you, and hopefully you can learn a little bit from me. I want you to think about this as a thinking out loud together session. That's what it is, thinking out loud together session. So I want you to feel free to contribute at any time. Just raise your hand, catch my attention, and you have the floor, and we would love to have you participate. I'm not going to call on anybody. You're safe because I don't know any of your names. But I am going to encourage your participation here in just a couple of minutes. Now, that's all of the preliminary stuff. Let me lead us in prayer, and then we'll dive into our subject. Father in heaven, we love you, and we thank you for this opportunity. Father, we know that this is a uniquely challenging and a very personal kind of subject to deal with. Talking about life and talking about the blessings and talking about the losses that we experience. It can be a real challenge when we look at it personally. Father, we thank you, though, for how your word helps us a lot with these issues. And we pray, Father, that as we think out loud together this afternoon, that hopefully there'll be benefit from all this for every single person who's here. Not only can it help us personally, but it can help us help other people in their life struggles. And so help us, Father, to see it from that purpose as well. Thank you, Father, for this good church. Thank you for the good-hearted nature of this church permitting this workshop together. It's in the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. Okay, what we're going to be talking about is life, love, and loss. And the place to begin that discussion is where life is lived. So here's what I want you to do for a couple of minutes. I want you to think about the world that we live in and give me a word or a phrase that you would use to describe the world that we live in. Give me a word or a phrase that you describe the world that we live in. Somebody get us started. Chaotic. Okay. Where did you ever get that idea? Well, if you happen to hear some news on the radio, or you happen to go to Facebook and scroll on Facebook, or if you happen to watch the news on TV, there's a lot of evidence that we live in a very chaotic world. Give me another word or a phrase you'd use. Ugly. Ugly. Why is it ugly? What makes the world ugly? What is it?
Sinful?
Yeah, the sin in the world. And all the collateral damage that comes from all the temptation and all the sin. You know, there are some really, I think, scary passages in the Bible. And one that I would put high on that list is 1 John 5:19, where the Bible says, the whole world lies under the sway of the wicked one. That is a scary statement. The whole world lies under the sway of the wicked one. Now, I know that you know that there's a God in heaven. Daniel 2:28 says that, as a matter of fact. Daniel said that very thing. There is a God in heaven. But there's also a devil in this world. And sometimes I do wonder if we believe in the devil. I know we believe in God, but do we believe in the devil? When was the last time that there was ever chaos or terrible consequences come from sin and somebody blamed the devil and got in the face of the devil and just was bound and determined to see that as something from the hand of the devil? When was the last time you ever heard anybody talk like that or respond like that to a bad time? But instead what we'll do is we'll blame God for either we think doing it, wanting it, or allowing it. Where's Satan in this whole situation? When things are so chaotic and sinful, and you've got all of this collateral damage coming from the sin of the world. So yeah, it's a chaotic world. It's also a sinful world. It's a broken world spiritually. Give me another word or phrase you'd use to describe the world. Divided. Politically. Divided. When you think about religiously, very, very divided. And that contributes to the chaos. We are economically and socially divided. There's a big difference in the socio-economic condition of various people in the world. So there's a lot of division, a lot of differences, a lot of diversity. Can you give me another word or phrase you'd use to describe the world we live in? Give me one more.
Majestic.
Confused?
No, majestic.
Okay, somebody said confused, majestic. Now, that's the first positive thing that was mentioned. Okay. Now, isn't it funny that we think that way? But I understand why we think that way, because those negative things are so in your face every day. But the other things are too. But boy, isn't it amazing how negative things can capture your attention and you just get so focused on those things? Now, I'm going to show you a picture. I'm going to ask you to look at this picture. And when you look at this picture, okay, here's some questions I want to ask you. Now, go back to English class. I know some of you probably slept through that class. But anyway, when you look at this picture, give me the part of speech of the words in this picture. what part of speech are the two words on that slide? Okay, they're nouns. They're not verbs, they're not adjectives, they're nouns. Okay? People, place, things. Does that strike a bell? You remember that one? Noun. People, place, things. Okay. So give me the number. You know, nouns have number. Singular or plural?
Plural.
Both of them are plural. Okay. Now, when your brain sees an image, when your eyes see an image, it sends a message to your brain. Okay, what does your brain tell you when you look at that picture? What's the point of that picture?
Blessings outweigh the burden.
The blessings outweigh the burdens. Okay? The blessings outweigh the burdens. Now, do you believe that?
Yes.
Does somebody have a Bible? Okay, go to Job 14 and verse 1. This is a Spanish Bible, so this is not going to help me. Okay. Job 14, verse 1. Read this passage now, real loud, good and loud. Read this passage so the person farthest away from you can hear you clearly. And when you do it, everybody be real careful and listen to this. Job 14, verse 1. Now, I want you to listen to this, but I want you to look at the screen as you hear what he's going to read. Okay, Job 14, 1. Go.
Man who is born of woman is few of days and full of trouble.
Okay. Man is born of woman. Now, do you know any other way to get born? Okay, unless you're a politician in the world, we understand you're born of woman. Okay, so check mark. And by the way, this is Job. Job's talking. He said, born of what? Man who is born of woman is of, what does it say about the length of life in that passage? Few days. I think you were reading from English Standard Version.
Yes,
Okay, and what's it say there?
a few days and full of trouble.
A few days and full of trouble. Now, do you believe that part? Now, I know you believe man is born of woman. Now, what about a few days? Okay, now, if that's true, why do we, let me ask. Since I'm not asking a specific individual, I'm just asking generically here, who's the oldest person here? Nobody. See? Don't you love the levity? Okay. No. So, okay. Now, you're not supposed to lie in the house of the Lord. Okay. Now, who is the oldest? I know I'm 72, and I know I'm not the oldest person here. Who will take claim to being the oldest person here?
I'm 79.
You're 79. You beat me. Okay. Do we have more than 79?
81.
81. I feel like an auctioneer. 72, 79, 81. Do I have an 82?
87.
87. Oh, anybody else? Going once? Going twice? 87. Floyd Weaver is 87 years old. Now, Floyd, in 3 years, you need a birthday party. If you don't get one before then, because that'd be 90, right? 87 plus 3. Why do we have birthday parties for 90-year-olds? Yeah, a lot of people don't make it that long. I believe the last time I checked about lifespan, when you throw the male and female both in the calculation, I think it's 77.4 now. Is the last. That's the average length of. You blew way past that, Floyd. 87. Now, Cheryl Wayne is going to bring over something that's a treasured part of the ministry. He's going to bring over the golden chest of prizes. The Widowhood Workshop Ministry is my family's passion project. And one thing we do is we reward people who have insignificant knowledge, and we reward the oldest person who comes to a workshop. So today, since you're the oldest one here in this session, in this golden chest of prizes, there's all kinds of stuff. And you can take anything, so you can get anything out of there that you want.
And your face is going to end up on Facebook.
Now, I will tell you, in my opinion, the most valuable thing in the golden chest of prizes is a can of Spam.
This is if you walk.
I don't know if he's going to have that kind of high value that he'll place on a can of Spam. But anyway, there's a whoopee cushion in there. There's all kinds of neat stuff. So anyway, you do that while we're going to be talking
He
then,
took
Floyd.
the toilet seat out, folks. There was a toilet seat in here. Somebody took it.
So we'll let you know what Floyd picks out. So, okay, I need you to focus again. So we make a big deal out of getting 90. What if you get 100? Okay, we make a big deal out of that. We take pictures, we have birthday parties, and we recognize that person because they get to 90 or 100.
Thank you.
Now, what would we call that life? When we're talking about the length of the life of the person, what do we say about that? What do we call it? We don't call it few days. We call it a long life. Is it a long life or is it a few days?
Yes.
Yes. A long life in whose perspective? Our perspective, a human perspective. What about in God's perspective?
It's short.
God, in the book of Isaiah, is described as one who inhabits eternity. Now, my little feeble mind, I've heard there's like 80 million cells in your brain. I don't think I have that many because mine doesn't work that good. But anyway, I have a hard time conceiving eternity. I mean, we have calendars and we have clocks. We have appointments and deadlines. I can't. Eternity is beyond my ability to comprehend. But God is an eternal being, and he sees things from an eternal perspective. So what is 90 or 100 years compared to or contrasted with eternity? It's not even a drop in the bucket. It is just a few days. And by the way, let me mention something to you that I learned about 18 to 20 months after my wife died. For about 2 years after my wife passed away, I fasted off of music. I made a point when I was driving to never have any music on the radio. I didn't want to hear any music. A lot of music has romantic overtones and I couldn't handle it. And so I just fasted off all music. That was during a period in my life when I got hooked on news talk radio. I was listening to an AM radio station in Jackson, Tennessee. I remember I was on Van Drive in Jackson, Tennessee. And this guy was preaching or teaching, and he made this observation, and boy, I don't think I'll ever forget this. He said, wisdom is when you see something the way God sees it. Boy, as soon as he said that, I thought, that's a profound observation. And he's right. Wisdom is when you see something the way God sees it. When you see marriage, the way God sees marriage. When you see family, the way God sees family. When you see church, the way God sees it. When you see money and finances and material possessions the way God does, you have wisdom about those subjects. Now, what about time? We need to realize that the time we have here is brief. Yes, this is a broken world, and yes, there's a lot of negatives, but the reality is there's also positives. Perspective matters. Now, Job 14, verse 1, I'm going to ask you to pull up that passage again. I'm going to ask you to read it again in just a minute. Now, remember the guy who said this, and this is recorded in the Bible. What did Job experience in the way of loss? You know, this is a Living with Loss workshop, so let's think about what Job lost. Name me some things that Job lost.
He lost his children.
He lost his children. Anybody here lose a child? Okay, I think that's the most abnormal, unnatural thing to lose. They're supposed to lose us. We're not supposed to lose them. But it happens. It's an awful thing. But he didn't lose a child. Does anybody remember how many children he had? He had 10.
Oh my God.
He lost every single one of those kids. So he didn't just lose a child, he lost every single one of his 10 children. Now, what effect do you think that had on you? Well, let's add something else. What else did he lose besides his children?
His richness.
Okay. His riches was in his livestock. He had camel and oxen and, oh man, he had all kinds of critters. That's what Jed Clampett would, those of you who are younger, you'll have to Google that name, Jed Clampett. But anyway, Jed Clampett would say critters. He had thousands of critters. His prosperity, but he lost all of his prosperity. He lost all 10 children. He lost all of his prosperity. What else did he lose? He lost his health. What happened to him? He didn't get cancer. Do you remember what his health problem was? Boils. From the bottom of his feet to the top of his head, he had boils. It was so bad that in chapter 2, when he had friends come to him, his friends didn't even recognize him. I mean, he was a mess. Now, if you'd lost all that, what effect do you think it would have on your ability to think? And how fast do you think your feeler would be running? Okay, now read Job 14, verse 1 again.
Man who is born of woman is few of days and full of trouble.
Few of days and full of trouble. Now, what about that last phrase? Now, he was right about man being born of woman. He was definitely right about a few days. It's like a vapor, James 4:14 says, like a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. No matter how long you live, it's a very short time from an eternal perspective. What about the full of trouble thing, though? Was he right about that?
I'm sorry, yes.
Say that again.
Yeah, he's right about that.
Okay, he was right about that. Why did he say that? That's a very extreme statement. Have you ever thought about that? What did he say about troubles? He didn't say life has troubles. What did he say about those troubles? Full. He used the word full. That's a pretty extreme statement. Full. Now, this bottle here, it says on the side, has 16.9 fluid ounces. I've taken a little bit out of it. But let's say that I take the top off and I drink this down to about here. Now, what would we call the bottle at that point? It definitely, we wouldn't think of it as being full, I don't think. What would we call it if the water level was right here? Half full or half empty, or there's another possibility. How could I say it's full? What's it full of? Water and air. Our lives are full. There's blessings and there's burdens. But he said full of trouble. Now, if something is full, what can you put in it? Remember the miracle in John 2 where Jesus, before he turned the water into wine, what did he say about the water level in the water pots? It was to be filled up how full? All the way to the brim. Now, when something's full, you can't put anything else in it. He said full of trouble. Is life full of trouble? Think about what Job said in contrast to what you see on the screen. Is Job right or is the screen right? And why did Job say full of trouble? Okay, he'd been through a very difficult time, and that's how he felt. That's how he felt. I am a person who's always looking for one-liners. There's a lot of, I think, one-liners that are just chock full of wisdom. Like, for instance, wisdom is when you see something the way God sees it. That's a one-liner. I was doing something and I was listening to the TV and something caught my attention. As soon as I heard it, I ran for a 3x5. This is what I do. I ran for a 3x5 card and I wrote it down. Here's the statement that was made in this roundtable discussion that they were having on TV. Feelings don't care about facts. Now, everybody has a feeler and a thinker. Everybody has a feeler. You have a feeler and a thinker. Now, you're not, if you've had anatomy and physiology in high school or in college, you're not going to read that kind of thing in an anatomy and physiology book. But the fact is, everybody has a thinker and a feeler. Now, you stop and think about that statement. Your feelings don't care about facts. Have you ever known somebody who was a Christian and a faithful Christian, but they didn't feel saved? Or have you ever known somebody who definitely, you know for a fact, they have not done what they did in the first century to become Christians, to be saved from their past sins. But yet they feel saved. You see, your feelings don't always care about facts. Your feeler will just go anywhere. Now, facts are facts, but your feeler doesn't care about facts. Your feeler will go anywhere it wants to. That's why sometimes some people cannot be convinced of something that is clearly black and white and very obvious to any reasonable-minded person. Because they'll have these feelings that don't care about the facts. Yes, sir.
Job was unequally yoked.
In what way? He said Job is unequally yoked.
Job's wife didn't think the same way he did, nor his friends.
He said Job's friends didn't think like he did, and Job's wife didn't think like. By the way, I'm going to be a defense attorney for Mrs. Job here for a minute. That may sound kind of weird. What was it that she said that she's noted for when they fell in hard times? Okay, curse God and die. Now there's no defense for the first part, the curse God. She said, and die. Boy, that's an extreme statement. Have you ever heard of or been in a situation where you've seen somebody suffer for an extended period of time, and instead of you praying for their survival, their recovery, you get to the point where you pray that the Lord will take them? Now, I have a question I don't have the answer to. What was her motive in saying that? It may have been a merciful cry on her part, wanting to end the suffering of her husband, who was right in his relationship with God. I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but it could have been. But what I do find interesting about that statement she made is God did not send a bolt of lightning from heaven to make her toast because she said that. Now, Job tried to correct her, but how many men sometimes do that unwittingly, not very carefully or wisely? Sometimes we need to pick the time to correct a person or try to change their thinking. Why did she say curse God and die? I mean, I don't think she was a heathen. I can't imagine somebody described like Job is in chapter 1, marrying somebody who's a heathen. But she had lost all the things that he had lost, right? Except for the health. So she was a mess and he was a mess. Both of their feelers were running wild, and their thinkers were all over the place, and their thinker and their feeler wasn't on the same page, just like you and I on occasion in our life. You know, we can know stuff in our mind, but then we have a feeler. And a lot of times what we know in our head, we can't wrap around our heart. And so it creates a lot of confusion. As when my wife died on Christmas morning of 2013, I knew because of what the Bible said. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, she was no longer at home in the body, so she was at home with the Lord. Now, I knew that. But that didn't change how my feeler felt about her absence, because I was left to deal with her absence. So a lot of times when we're in a stormy time of our life, we're not thinking straight. Our feeler is in overdrive, and we're confused. We may have self-doubt. We're just really struggling, and we say and do things that are just not us. We can't expect ourselves to be normal when we're in a high-stress situation. Job was struggling, she was struggling, and I love how patient that God was with them. He was patient with her. When she said, curse God and die, he didn't kill her because she said that. And when Job said a lot of things were way out of line in chapters 3 following in the book of Job, God just let it go. And one of the best things you can do when you're in the presence of hurting people who are saying things that are way out of character for them. I mean, you know them, and what they're saying is way out of character now. Sometimes the best thing to do is just listen. Don't even try to correct them. Even if they say something way out of line that's not true. you know, you just need to pick your time to address certain special topics. I will not teach the gospel to a drunk. I will try to sober up the drunk so they can receive the gospel, but when they're drunk, they cannot receive the gospel. Some people, you can't expect us to direct our thinking differently when we're in a high-stress situation. So hopefully God will providentially bless us with some people that can redirect our thinking later when we're more ourselves and can think more clearly about stuff. So Job was a mess. Mrs. Job was a mess. Job said full of trouble. Job's life was not full of trouble. Let me prove that to you. Number one, he had life. Is that a blessing? Do you thank God for life? A lot of times in the morning, in my very first prayer, I'll thank the Lord for the rest from last night and the ability to open my eyes and actually see. And I've got another time of life. I don't know if I'll have the whole day, but life is a blessing, right? Job had the blessing of life. Now, secondly, what was his marital state? If he'd gone to the doctor, and you know how they always ask about your marital state? By the way, I was with my vision care doctor, and I hate machines. I'd much rather deal with people. But on the screen, when the marital status thing came up, there were 11 options. 11 options. I took a picture of the screen. It's in my phone. I had no idea there were 11 options. On another occasion after that, I had a screen that had 14 marital status options. Okay, now, what was his marital status? What box would he check if he went to the doctor? What was he? He was married. Is that a blessing? Those of you who are married better say yes. This is your time to say yes, okay? Especially you men, okay? Marriage is a blessing. I call it an unparalleled blessing. There's no blessing like marriage, none. Marriage is what I call a pregnant blessing. It's a blessing with a whole bunch of blessings inside of it. Whenever you're married and you're enjoying blessings, you have somebody to share them with. That raises the value of the blessing. When you have a burden to experience in life and you're married, you're sharing that burden with somebody else, that lightens the burden and helps you to navigate that storm in your life. Whenever you're married, you have somebody to listen to and you have somebody to talk to. You have somebody to hug, somebody to kiss, somebody to eat with. See how many blessings there are with marriage? I really didn't appreciate that like I should have in the 41 years I was married. I should have appreciated that a lot more. You know when I learned that? When she was gone. One of my missions in life is to remind married people of how richly, I mean richly, blessed they are. Job was married. He was alive. He was married. Now, in addition to that, he had friends. Now, I know I'm going to be the defense attorney now for his friends. Okay, his friends in Job chapter 2 and verse 11 came to him. Now, notice they weren't fair weather friends. Job was a mess. They heard that Job was a mess. They did not send him an email. Hey, Job, did you get my email? Did you get my text? Why don't you and Mrs. Job come and be with us and kind of get away for a while? They didn't do that. What they did was they went to him. Now, do you know there are some people who will not go into the presence of somebody hurting because of how it might negatively affect them? Do you know what that is? That is a form of idolatry. And the idol is the comfort zone. If we are that protective of our comfort zone, more so that instead of choosing to do what God says and love them and comfort them and support them, we choose instead to stay apart because of the potential effect on our comfort zone. That means our comfort zone is more important than God. That's a modern form of idolatry. Christians are God's first responders. Anybody here ever been a first responder? Now, okay, when you hear the fire of a gun, what does a first responder do? Where do they go?
Everybody should go for cover first, but then
The first responder, though,
analyze the
runs
to
to the sound of the fire. Okay? If the building is burning and there's smoke billowing, where does the first responder go? Other people flee, the first responders go to serve. His 3 friends dropped everything in their life and went to him. Now, not only did they do that, but also they went for the right reason. Job 2 and verse 11 says they went to mourn and to comfort him. They did not go to do him a disservice. They did not go to hurt him or to nail him to a wall or to straighten him out. They went for the right purpose. Now, things went haywire later. They mourned with him. They sat with him for a whole week. They sat with him silent, ministering to him by their presence. Our presence in other people's lives is the most valuable, the most comforting, the most strengthening thing we can do for them. When did those 3 friends become miserable comforters? What did they do that made them miserable comforters later? They opened their mouth. That's right, they opened their mouth. He had friends. Now, eventually, they morphed into miserable comforters, but he had friends. So if you've got life, and if you're married, and you have friends, how blessed are you? This doesn't sound like full of trouble. Now, not only that, the big one, the cherry on the top, he had God. If you have God, how blessed are you? You're big blessed. You're really big blessed. He had God. However, this thing he was going through had such a powerful impact on him. In Job chapter 7 and verse 6, he said something that I never noticed for decades in my life as a Christian until only in recent years. Now, the first part of Job 7 verse 6 I'd heard before. I'd heard old preachers quote this passage at memorial services. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. Now, there's another part of that verse. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and are spent without hope. Now you stop and think about what Job said. My days are spent without hope. Did he have hope? Let me ask you another question. Did he have God? If you have God, do you have hope? Oh, he had hope. He had God in his life. As a matter of fact, God was providentially watching over him and caring for him. See, he was feeling one thing, but his life experience was actually another thing. He was more blessed than he was burdened. We are always more blessed than we're burdened, but we may not always feel that way. That's what we need to understand. We may not always feel that way. Here was a great man of God who was put in a pressure cooker, and there were times he snapped, just like Mrs. Job. She snapped when she said, curse God and die. Now, if people like them would be that way, what do you think about us? Us more ordinary people. I mean, I've never put myself in the category of Job. A great man of God. And yet, he snapped. He had the audacity to say he had no hope. Romans 15:13 says, God is a God of hope. If we have God, we always have hope. Even if we have nothing else, if we have God, we have hope. Oh man, what a powerful impact all of his losses had on him. He wasn't thinking straight, and his feeler was running in overdrive and dominating his thinking. And what do you think happens to us when we suffer great loss? The same thing. We need to be patient with ourselves when we suffer great loss. And there's all kinds of great losses we can experience in our life that can really shake us up. Not just the loss of people. There's a lot of other kinds of losses we're going to talk about here in a minute. But here, I want us to take a break and do this. I want everybody to stand, please. Cheryl Wayne is going to lead us in a song. It's going to be a reminder of something that we know is true, but we don't always remember it. Cheryl Wayne, go right ahead.
We'll use the fourth verses back to back, the chorus once at the end. When up on life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. When you look at others with their lands and gold, think that Christ has promised you his wealth untold. Count your many blessings money cannot buy, your reward in heaven nor your home on high. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, angels will attend, help and comfort give you to your journey's end. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Be seated, please.
Wow, are we ever blessed? If we would think more specifically and start making a list of every blessing that we have in our life, I think we could convince ourselves that we are more blessed than we're burdened. Whenever my wife was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, she began to lose many blessings. She lost the ability to get up out of a chair by herself. She lost the ability to walk. She lost the ability to go to the bathroom by herself. She lost the ability to take a shower by herself. She lost the ability to dress herself, to undress herself, lost the ability to get in a bed or out of a bed. She lost the ability to eat, and she lost the ability to talk. How many times have you ever thanked the Lord for any of those blessings I just mentioned? See, we think generically when we really need to think specifically. If we want to grow and deepen our gratitude, think specifically. On those sunshiny days, I not only thank the Lord for the sunshine, I thank the Lord for the ability to see it. There are people who cannot see the sunshine. They experience it. They could be burned by it, but they don't see it. But I can see it. We're all more blessed than we're burdened. But this is how powerful burdens can be. Burdens can blind us to our blessings. That's what happened to Job. Now, if you're with us Sunday, we'll see an example of a good man of God, a great man of God, David, who didn't let that happen in Psalm 31. But Job, at this point in his life, he permitted his burdens to blind him to his blessings, and he just said, full of trouble. Whenever we are stressed, a lot of times we use extreme terminology. We'll say things that are just extreme, out of the... Like when a woman is mad at her husband because he's not taking the trash out, she'll say, well, you never take the trash out anymore. And, well, he does. As a matter of fact, a month ago, he did a video of him taking the trash out just to protect himself, to be able to defend himself. But you see, whenever we get cranked up, whenever we get stressed or highly emotional, we'll use hyperbole. Well, now, I'm not getting political with this, but we have a president who is hyperbolic. He often speaks in hyperbole, and we need to realize that. We don't need to be taking everybody so literally. Some people just have a characteristic about them where they talk a little bit more extreme than typical people do. Now, here is an issue with blessings. When you have a blessing and you have it for a while, what happens a lot of times is you become attached to it or to them. Now, what is the name of the movie represented on that slide?
Christmas Story.
Christmas Story. That's the easy question. No, you are not going to get a chance to go into the golden chest of prizes because you know that. That's too easy. Does anybody know the name of the boy whose tongue is stuck to the pole? And don't pick up your phone to check. What? Are you kidding me? Oh, sister, in addition to digging into the golden chest of prizes, you get a hug from me, okay? At the end of the session. Yes, his name is Flick. Okay, you get a chance to dig into the golden chest of prizes. Wow. Well, are you married?
I lost my husband.
You lost your husband. Would you go home with me? That's why I asked that question.
Hey, he's not proposed to too many people in all the years I've been with Widowhood Workshop. You better start this calendar.
It's recorded. It's recorded. Oh, it's so easy over time and with experience to become attached to blessings in our life. Now, let me give you an example. Okay, a four-legged critter that you buy, if you're not cheap, I'd go to the dog pound. But okay, when you go to a breeder and you pay $1,000, $1,500 for a four-legged critter. Okay, what three-letter word do we use to describe that? What is that thing? That living creature you're bringing into your house? It's a pet. Okay, but what does it become over time? Family. It becomes your child. See, you become attached. You talk to it. Yeah. And you treat it like a member of the family. Do you know there are pet cemeteries? I saw a pet cemetery in Goshen, Indiana when I was doing a workshop up there. The coolest one I ever saw was in Wiley, Texas, north of Detroit. These gas and oil people, they must really love their pets.
Dean, Wiley, Texas is not north of Detroit.
Dallas. Thank you for correcting me. I didn't even watch while I was, yeah.
He has a problem with directions.
North of Dallas, yeah, there's Wiley, Texas, and they have a beautiful pet cemetery there. These gas and oil people, they have more money than sense, I guess, but boy, I hope that doesn't get out to them. But anyway, we become really attached to them, don't we? Yeah. And so what happens when you lose your pet? Does it have an effect on you? Yeah. There's a grieving process. Now, do any of you remember the first episode of the Bill Cosby Show? Now, that was way back. Okay, it was about the death of the family fish. And they had a memorial service over the toilet. Before, at the end of the show, they flushed the fish down the toilet. That was the family fish. See, what happens is over time, you become attached to people and things. And when you lose something that you become attached to, that has an effect on you. And that effect is grief. And the greater the attachment, the closer the attachment, the greater the grief. So if you become really attached and you lose that blessing, then you really struggle. As a matter of fact, you struggle so much that it's really obvious by your appearance that you're a mess. It changes your demeanor. It actually changes your appearance, and it changes your function in social connections and public places. Now, here's what I want you to think about. Don't think about people now. Think about things, not people. What could a person lose that might really shake them up? Now, we talked about a pet, but what else? Okay, a job. Okay. Clyde worked for the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. I was the preacher in Hartville, Ohio for 33 years. Hartville, Ohio, I was born in Columbus, Ohio, lived most of my life in the Buckeye State. And by the way, we won the national championship in college football, in case you don't remember that. But anyway, Clyde Grimmett was a member of the church there, and that's between Akron and Canton, Ohio. He worked for the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. Akron, Ohio used to be the rubber capital of the world. He was a high-level accountant there for 39 years. One day, they came in, and they said to him, Clyde, we're moving your job down to Nashville. He said, well, I don't want to go to Nashville. And they said, well, Clyde, we don't want you to go to Nashville either. He didn't retire. He was retired. He was dumped. He was hurt. That really hurt him. He was mad. Now, months later, after they disconnected themselves from him, they came back to him because things were a mess, because my daughter is a high-level accountant for Bridgestone Firestone in Nashville now. And she was working for the company when all this happened. She said, Dad, things were a mess down in Nashville. They didn't prep somebody to take his place. So after a few months, they go back to him and say, Clyde, will you come back and help us during a time of transition? What do you think he said? No way, Jose. I ain't going back. He was mad. He was grieving the loss of his job. That job, to a great extent, was his self-esteem and his personal identity. He grieved the loss of his job. Now, hey, by the way, let me tell you the end of that story, because there is a positive ending. Things continued to be a mess, and they went back to him a second time. And he told me this part. He said, Dean, they came back to me and they said, Clyde, what would it take to get you to come back for a while to help us out? And he said, Dean, I named a number I knew they would not match. And they matched it. And he smiled real big when he told me that story. But the loss of a job can cause a person to grieve. Now, give me something else that a person could lose that could shake them up.
Phone.
A phone, okay. What is the big deal about the phone? What is the big deal about this phone?
It's your life.
Oh, yeah, it's almost become your life, hadn't it? What's it got in it?
Well, it's your connection
To who?
family,
Yeah.
friends.
You got all these contacts in here. You've got all their numbers. You know how to contact them. You can text them. You can email them. You can call them. This is a big deal to lose your phone. Cheryl Wayne, tell them about being up in Detroit, Michigan. Come over here for a minute. Tell them about this story about, we were up at the Waterford Church of Christ, which is just north of Detroit, Michigan. Come over here because this is being videotaped as well.
Now, in my billfold is my driver's license, credit cards, everything. We go to a museum. I get out of the car and the billfold drops onto the parking lot.
But you don't know it.
And I did not know it at the time. And we go and we do wander around this museum, get back. We drive about 30 minutes to a restaurant. We get ready to go in and I go, Dean, I've lost my billfold. Now I'm in instant panic. It's like, how do I rent a car to drive home? How do I get an airplane ticket? I'm stuck in Detroit the rest of my life, and I got a southern accent. I don't fit in Detroit too well. So anyway, we drive back to the museum. So I get out and I walk up to this lady and I said, did anybody by chance turn in a billfold? And she said, you're the guy that lost it? I said, yes, ma'am, I am. I can tell you the name on the driver's license. You can look at me and see I'm as ugly as the picture is. We can match this up if we have to. She said, come on, go to the office. Took me in the office. The girl said, you lost it? I said, yes. I gave her the name. She pulled it out of the drawer. There was not $1 missing from that billfold. And I thought, thank the good Lord, I'm not stuck in Detroit.
He was a mess when he lost his billfold because that billfold had value. Jesus said in Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Your heart follows your treasure. The value of something is the value you place on it in your heart. It's not the price tag, it's the value you place on it in your heart. Why do people pay an overpriced value for something? Because they want it. Because they treasure that. And sometimes they'll pay an exorbitant price way above fair market value because they want it. Well, when we have become so attached to something that we have placed great value on it and we lose it, it'll shake us up. Now, give me something else besides a billfold. Give me another one. A home. Now, what is the big deal about that? Because thanks to the lady who lives, I call her Miss Google. She lives in my phone. She's real short and she's skinny, but she tells me all kinds of stuff. If you give me your address, I can, with her help, find the overpriced value Zillow puts on your house. Yeah, it is overpriced, okay? But that's only money. That's only money. That's all it is. Now, really, what's eternal about money? It's not. Now, also, that house that we're so shaken up about that we lost, okay, you're talking about wood, shingles, glass, some electrical wires. What's the big deal? Why are we so shook by the loss of the house? How do you answer that question?
Because it's home.
Because it's home.
The memories in that home.
Okay, what are the memories of? People. Okay.
It's like that country music song where he said, I buried my dog under that tree and I pushed my little girl in that swing. And inside the house, there's markings on the wall that she made. And he's like, you can't give me anything for that.
Yeah, I love that song. It's so touching, so thought-provoking, and so true. Yes, it is, so true. Hey, by the way, find that song and text it to my phone, that you can find my phone number on the back of a business card out there on the table. Okay. I'd like to include that, because I had never thought about how that relates. I love that song, but I never thought about how it relates to this particular session. Life, now life, that's a pretty big thing, life. I can reduce life to 3 words. People, relationships, and experiences. That's all it is. People, relationships, and experiences. That's what life is. It's not your age. It's not your health condition. It's not your home. It's not where you live. Life is people, relationships, and experiences. Now, that's what makes that home so special. The house becomes a home because of the people who live in it, the experiences that you have together, and the relationships developed as a result of that. And then, if you were to lose your home, what would be in that home that would be irreplaceable, that you would just be torn up about losing, and you cannot duplicate? Photos. Now, stop and think about those hard copy photos. Those hard copy photos are a card. That's what they are. They're a card. What makes that card not just precious, but in some cases priceless? What makes that card so valuable? Who's on it? That card may not have anybody on it, but it may have a picture of an experience. Some place that you went, most often with somebody else, people, relationships, and experiences. And when those photographs are ruined by a flood or burned in a fire, you can't replace them. And what do? You grieve. You grieve because those photographs were really important to you. You placed a value on them. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Yes, sir.
So one time where I used to be a minister, there was an L5 tornado. And one of the biggest things that people did is, instead of throwing away the pictures, everybody collected the pictures and they made a social media site where they could go get their pictures. So they had pictures from like 100 miles away. People addressed in a different state.
People saw the need to reconnect those photographs with the people that lost them. That is a very wise and very compassionate, very creative idea. But it just, it's gut-wrenching when we lose things that are really valuable to us. Has anybody here ever been told they have cancer? Anybody gotten the C word? Okay. Cheryl Wayne's a 2-time cancer survivor. One time?
No, 2.
2. Boy. When you get a cancer diagnosis, what have you lost? Your health. I was, again, in Jackson, Tennessee. The nurse practitioner that I had was a member of the church. I decided one time that when he entered the room, you're in the big waiting room, then you get called into the little waiting room, and then you wait longer. I decided when he came into the room this time, I wasn't going to address him like we typically address one another as brothers in the Lord. And so he walks in the door, and I said, "Hey, Brent, when do people appreciate their health?" What do you think he said? Just like that. When they lose it. When they lose it. Isn't that a shame that we're that way? But we are. A lot of times we don't appreciate the blessings we have until we lose them. And boy, when we lose them, if it was a real special blessing, it's gut-wrenching. It's really hard to deal with, and we're just a mess. There are some people who grieve that I really feel probably more deeply for than any other grievers. Godly parents who have invested their lives into the lives of their children and raise them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, but they've lost them to the world. They haven't lost them to death, but they've lost them to the world. And if they died in that condition, they will have lost them for eternity. I feel deeply for godly parents who are grieving the loss of their children to the world or to the devil. Stop and think about the young lady on a college campus who's raped. She loses her virginity in that terribly violent experience. Do you think she's going to grieve? Sure. What about the young lady, and again, be totally honest, what about the young lady who no doubt loves the Lord dearly and deeply, but one night she gives her virginity to her boyfriend? Do you think that godly young lady is going to grieve? James chapter 4 talks about the weeping, how our joy sometimes needs to be turned to mourning. In the context, he's talking about sin. There are times we need to mourn the sin that we have chosen in our life. And she's going to mourn the loss of her virginity by that choice of gifting it. But godly men and women of any age can make bad choices. And again, we need to be patient with ourselves because God's patient with us. And sometimes we're not as patient with ourselves as we are with others. But we need to be understanding that when we suffer great loss, we're going to be a mess. It's going to be a part of the struggle. And grief is hard. It's really hard to cope with it so that it doesn't become the dominator of our life. And grief does have that power. Grief has the power to dominate a person's life. We're going to talk about that tomorrow morning if the Lord permits. But grief is such a powerful thing that it can dominate and control and ruin your life. Sometimes people die when they suffer loss. They live physically, but they just exist. That's why one of the mottos of the Widowhood Workshop Ministry is don't die until you're dead. But sometimes when you've lost something of great significance, especially a person in your life, you'll feel dead. You may even want to die. But don't die until you're dead. Don't accept mere existence. What we need to learn about is we need to learn about grief. We need to learn about navigating that stormy time in our life so that we can navigate the storm and get to a better place in our life. There's life after loss. But we need to learn to navigate the loss and embrace the loss without it becoming our identity. It's not an easy thing to do. And that's why we do these Living with Loss workshops, is to help people become educated about grief and help people learn to navigate it and encourage people who are dealing with it. Now, let me share with you something I think that's very valuable. We need to understand that when we suffer loss, we are beginning to experience a time of transition in our life. Now, some changes are chosen. Some changes are forced on us. And the fact is, they have similarities, but they also have differences. Chosen change. Let me give you an example of chosen change. I did not grow up in the church. My dad was an unfaithful Christian. I didn't even know this. I didn't know anything about his religious background. I never went to church until I was about 14 or 15 years old. Dad decided he was going to come back to the Lord. Well, I'd never read the Bible. I'd never been to church. So Dad decides we're going to become a church-going family. So the Lord really did not attract me, to be very honest with you. But there was a 15-year-old girl at church. She caught my interest. And I chose to cultivate a relationship with her. And 5 years later, we chose to bite the dust together. and say, I do. At age 19, both of us. We chose to go from being single teenagers to married teenagers at age 19. That's a chosen change. That's a big change, isn't it? Going from single to married, that's a big change. Well, it's also a big change going from married to being widowed. But you don't choose that latter one, do you? See, that's something that's forced on you. Sometimes what life does is life says, okay, here it is. Here. Cancer. Or here. You lost your house. Well, you tell life, I don't want that. Life doesn't care what you want. Life's going to give you whatever it wants to give you. And what we need to learn to do is deal with what life gifts us. Sometimes life gifts us loss. Now, life gives us way more blessings, but sometimes life gifts us burdens. And we wouldn't, would we? Re-gift it to somebody else? I know what you women do when you get a gift you don't want. Okay? You have to be honest with at least me. You'll turn around and you'll re-gift that item. And you will not tell the original giver. Some of you, what you'll do is you'll put it out the next time you do a garage sale. Or you'll try to return it right away. Or you'll stick it in a closet so you don't have to think about it anymore because it's out of sight, out of mind. And you don't see it for another 20 years until you move out of that house and you find that thing and you say, man, that is the ugliest thing I've ever been gifted in my life. I know what you women do. But see, you can't do that with loss. You're stuck with it. Would you want to re-gift it to somebody else? No way. So we have to learn to deal with it. So there's chosen change and forced change. Now, with either one of those, there's a transition. Now, the fellow who wrote this book, this fellow, William Bridges, is a world-renowned expert in the field of transitions. He travels all over the world, and he lectures and trains organizations and businesses about transitions to help them navigate going through transitions in the existence of their organization or their company. This book is one-word title, Transitions. Outstanding book. The subtitle of the book is Making Sense of Life's Changes. I'm going to save you reading all these pages with 2 slides, and this is the first one. What he points out in this book is that with every change, there's a new beginning. A change automatically creates a new beginning. But what we oftentimes don't understand is there's something in between. Now, here's what I did for you. I picture it like a forest. Now, if you look at this picture, this is a forest, and there's some real weird characteristics of this forest. Let me explain to you about this forest. This forest has no footprints in it. It's as if nobody's ever been in it. It also has no pathways. It's like nobody's ever been in it before. But this forest does have people. I told you it was weird. It's a time in your life where you're in a time of transition. He has the terminology, here's the second slide. He calls it the neutral zone. Now, there are times in our life when we're experiencing changes, we need to recognize the reality of this neutral zone. And what you're going to need to do, forever how long it's going to take you, is you want to navigate through that forest, but you have no footprints to follow, no pathway to follow. See, this is your decision to make it through this forest. Now, you're probably going to do a lot of trial and error. It's a very difficult time in your life. It can be confusing. You can suffer some difficult times and frustrated times. The people that you're going to meet in this phase of your life, some of them may be helpful. They may be considerate and helpful. I guarantee you, though, that you're going to experience in this time in your life neglect, because other people do not understand what you're going through. You're not just going to feel neglected, you're going to be neglected. I neglected the widowed for decades as a local preacher, and it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I didn't know what they were going through. I'd never read one book about widowhood. I knew the Bible made reference to widows, but I never read one book written by a widow. I was totally clueless about what it was like. Now, I knew that loss was an awful thing. That was clear to me because during all that time I was working there as a preacher, I was with people pre-loss, at loss. I officiated at those memorial services. But what I was clueless about was life after loss. Dealing with that loss every day and every night the rest of your life. And that's what you have to learn to do. But it's a challenge. Now, there's something called the 3 C's. I'm going to bring Cheryl Wayne up here again. And Cheryl, explain to this good-looking group about the 3 C's that we learned about.
Dean and I were at Frieda Hardeman for the lectureships one year. We were at the table that Dean sets up to promote his ministry, and this brother came up and talked to us, and he said, you know, we're really good in the Church of Christ about the 3 C's. Well, Dean and I, kind of looked at each other. Being a preacher's kid, I'm going, where's this going? Because I don't understand. He said, yeah, we're really good with loss in the 3 C's. For the first 2 weeks, we're really good about our condolences verbally. For the next 2 weeks, we're real good about sending cards, and we might be good about taking a casserole, but after that, we're done with this.
You ought to be over it by now, shouldn't you? A lot of people don't understand. There's a lot of grief illiteracy. That's what H. Norman Wright called it, grief illiteracy. There's a lot of grief illiteracy. And when you don't know about grief, it's hard to navigate the storm of grief because not only do you not know much about it, but your social network doesn't either. And so because of that, it's going to make this challenge even more difficult. As a matter of fact, there are going to be people who are going to neglect you. So it's not sometimes what they do, it's what they don't do. And then in addition to that, you're going to have people say things to you, you're going to want to slap them because of what they say. I remember talking to this one lady in Fort Mill, South Carolina, which is a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. And she was telling me about this awful thing that happened, something her husband said to her. And I said, well, did you slap him after he said that to you? She said, I did in my mind. I slapped him. Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot of widows and widowers and other people who've suffered loss who would like to slap some folks who said some things to them. Let me give you a couple of examples. A young lady suffers a miscarriage, and somebody comes up to her, gives her a hug, and says, honey, don't worry about this. You can get pregnant again. There's 2 things wrong with that. Number one, you do not know she can get pregnant again. She may never, ever be able to get pregnant again. Don't ever say that to somebody in that situation. And number 2, she does not need to be thinking about another child. She needs to be focusing exclusively on the child she lost. That's a part of the grieving process. We need to realize that there are times early on, our entire focus needs to be on the loss and deeply grieving the loss of whatever thing or individual that was. She doesn't need to be thinking about a second child. Let me tell you about this widow lady who finally went out of the house. She sent me, I printed it out as a hard copy. She was telling me about, she like hermitized her life. She became like a hermit. She just stayed inside. She decided she needed to go to the grocery store, first time to go to the grocery store after she lost her husband. She said, I felt like I was going out into enemy territory. Can you imagine that extreme? But see, that was her. What if I were to have a flat if I were driving? Or what if something happened to me at the grocery store? See, she saw all this peril just going to the grocery store. But she gets up the courage to go to the grocery store. When she's at the grocery store, she crosses paths with this older lady who's a member of the church, just like her. And the older lady approached this young girl who had lost her husband, and she said, to the younger widow, what are you doing here? You don't have a husband to cook for. She actually said that. Now, there's no doubt in my mind, but that there was no ill intention on the part of that older lady. Sometimes we just say stupid stuff at the worst times. And that person told me she just turned around and walked away and went and bawled. There are people who are going to, during this time in your life, there are going to be people who are going to say and do things that are going to make your life more difficult. You've got to be patient with other people. You've got to be patient with yourself. You're not going to immediately recover. You can get to the other side, by the way, of grief. But it's a journey. It takes time and effort, concentrated effort and focused over a long period of time. But it's going to be a struggle. We can get to a new beginning that can be a good life, but it's going to be a different life. It's a new beginning. A new beginning is because you've lost something. So we've got to understand there's a loss, there's a recovery process, and then there's the establishment of a new life. Whenever you're such a mess, you need help. Some of you look old enough to remember the name Batsell Barrett Baxter, one of the finest communicators of truth that the Brotherhood has ever had. He wrote a book called When Life Tumbles In. I'm going to read you as we close this session. I'm going to read you this quote. When we reduce life and we must carry heavy burdens, we receive our greatest help, not from those having never carried similar burdens, as they stand on the sidelines and give bland advice, but from those who have been through the same valleys and have suffered the same problems. Who is going to help that godly parent who's lost a child to the world most effectively? Somebody who's been through that. How about the cancer patient who's scared to death about the chemotherapy treatments and the side effects? Who's going to help that person better than anybody else? Somebody who's been there and done that. How about the family that's gone through bankruptcy? How about the family who has been given a cancer diagnosis of a family member? Maddie and Tay